Airplay thingy.
Okay, so I think we're going to get started, and so I want to thank everyone for coming. I think let me just put this up. If you haven't muted your phone, mute. If you can mute that for me, that would be great. If you have questions, certainly unmute yourself. Ask questions at any point in time during this. And then that will help everyone learn more. I think each one of us, including myself, can learn a lot about everyone else's experiences in dealing with securing your data. Um, just a quick little tidbit. Robert Ponzo and myself started the user group. Some of you may have attended DevCon, was able to go to our first presentation there. This is basically our second meeting, which we plan to do always like in this type of format, a webinar type of format. Um, if it's big, we got to move to more of a go-to webinar as opposed to a go-to meeting. So maybe a little bit less interactive is what I would want. Okay, so that said, back. So housekeeping, I am recording the meeting. We're going to make it available up on YouTube with a link from FMHUG, so you can do that. Unmute yourself to ask questions. Um, a quick little DevCon review based on the meeting that we had there was that people wanted these meetings more be like a panel discussion. Um, three or four people getting together to discuss a topic, how they approached it. What that enables everyone to do that's on the panel, you have to do a little less preparation. Where if you're doing a big presentation to try and fill an hour, it could take 8 to 10 hours of work sometimes to be able to do that. So we're looking for volunteers to help with specific topics that you may be good at and have a lot of knowledge about and want to share that with everyone. Also, if you want to suggest stuff, then go to the FileMaker Hub forums and just put some stuff in there, and we'll try and keep that going. The biggest thing I think out of the DevCon meeting was that people want to know how to break the IT barriers. And I think we'll hit that as a panel discussion and get a few people from around the country to discuss their experiences and how they've been able to do it and what approaches may be best for all of us to do that. So today's objective is basically implement security measures on our iPhone and iPad. I'll be exclusively just talking about the iPhone, but it doesn't really matter. It's basically the iOS device, right? It's the operating system there. So we'll talk about the iOS security features, how bring your own device to work can help um, in that. Uh, what institutions, uh, from my perspective, have liked or disliked about that and what my experiences are. Then we'll get into a little bit about the FileMaker security. And this is all geared towards accessing it from, let's say, an iPhone, okay, from FileMaker Go and securing it. We'll talk a little bit, glossing over kind of managing PHI because that can be a whole thing within itself. And I think that's more server side, where the data is being stored and whatnot. And then we'll get into mobile device management. And Robert will be talking about that. He did a lot of research for his company and what they ultimately chose, and he'll discuss why they chose it. Um, So personal health information, that's basically one of the things where we're trying to protect. So we have personal health information um, that could be on a device or want to access from a device, I should say. Um, and 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 it's not a HIPAA violation to store it on a device. I think a lot of institutions would tell you otherwise, that they don't want any PHI on it. And I understand that because it can be that they can't control your device. They don't know what you did to set it up, right? And that's what we're going to go into in a little bit. Um, and I would tend to say that an iPhone or an iPad is more secure than most PCs within the organization. Okay, the hardware is automatically encrypted, and most PCs are not. So from an iOS perspective, you have the auto login to apps. I would recommend turning that off for most of your apps for this. The encryption that the hardware is using is an AES 256-bit. So everything on the device that you add onto it is encrypted. And there is a lot of documentation about what they're encrypting, how they do it. So, and I'll get into that a little bit more. The one thing that you shouldn't be doing, and this is kind of outside of FileMaker, is not be sharing files from Dropbox or Google or the Google Drive. It can put your stuff at risk, and where this data is being stored, they don't have a business associate agreement with the institution also. So that could be a huge violation if it ever did get in the hands, or there was a data breach in it. Dropbox is encrypted, but they don't make any representations that they are HIPAA compliant. I think on your device, you want to take off the simple passcodes. You want a more complex alphanumeric passcode. And because of the Touch ID, this has made it be a lot easier to do a much more complicated passcode, because you can remember, but you don't have to constantly type it every single time. So take advantage of the Touch ID ability, put a stronger passcode in. Just so you understand, is that your passcode is also linked in with the an internal ID, the device ID, to make it even that much more secure. Your code. It would basically take a 7-digit passcode to be brutally take about 5.5 years to crack your passcode by brute force. They also slowed down, the iOS also slows down your ability to keep on entering in a wrong passcode. The auto lock, I think it should definitely be turned on. I have mine after 1 minute. The Touch ID, once again, makes it more convenient to get right back into it. So just so you know, the general, where it is where you want to change that setting. So it's general under auto lock. Backups via iTunes. Make sure you turn on your encryption on the iTunes so your backups are encrypted on the device whatever computer you're hooked into. Highly recommend do that, and do not back it up to the iCloud. So if you have a FileMaker file that's sitting on there and you send it up to the iCloud, and that might have PHI data on that, so you might want to turn that off. So also, this has been around for a long time, the active erase data. I have it on my device. I strongly recommend doing that. I think it makes it much more compliant. And that's where you can hit it. I'm sure this is nothing new. Some of these things may be new. Also, the remote tracking. So if you lose your phone, the ability to wipe it remotely is a good thing as well. The one thing I didn't know was Siri. Don't allow access to Siri when your phone is locked, because there can be some security things, concerns around that, and being able to access information on the device when it's locked. So recommend turning that off. Anyone have any questions about the iOS? Okay. So these are our different FileMaker deployment options. We're going to be concentrating on the Go solution, and what we're going to do, I'm just going to reiterate if you can mute yourself, and then if you have questions, um, just unmute yourself and just ask a question. That's all fine. The way to mute yourself is you can click your green microphone and just select mute. Now, these are some of the options that looking at too. We have a VPN through the firewall. And the main focus of today is about accessing data that's stored on the server that's not local to the iPhone. You could do that and still make it HIPAA compliant, but it brings in a lot more complications of data transfer and where the data is going and whatnot, which we can discuss in another meeting. So from a FileMaker Go perspective, the security around it, we're going to connect to a data source through, I always turn on SSL secure link on my FileMaker server admin. A lot of times, because of the organization in general, they're not going to open up port 5003 just to get to a FileMaker server somewhere on their network. So they're going to ask you to come in through a VPN, which the iOS device generally can handle just fine. And then you want to, and then this feature of not being able to store your password, whether it's in FileMaker Go or in FileMaker, I think is a key thing that you want to make sure that's unchecked. You don't want to really store your pass to get into the system on the device and ask the user to do that. And then also we can authenticate still on the outside, even from your iPhone, from FileMaker Go to Active Directory for that type of authentication too. Things that I've been doing more convenient, it's just provider based, and what providers are looking for, in my opinion, is that we're doing an auto login into FileMaker with a PIN and a persistent ID connection. And I'm going to demonstrate how we're doing that. It's more convenient for the doctors, maybe a little bit less secure, but by wrapping around with a persistent ID, we're able to, I think, I believe we're still being HIPAA compliant in that way. So I'm going to just pause this and kind of open up a little demo and talk about what I've been doing with it. So as you can see, I have my phone still open, and my wife called me. Surprise. So let's go into the, should I go into local file? Yeah. Going to use the local file first. So in here we have I basically designed, I just want to go through how this is being set up. Let me close this and actually go in and hold down my Option key. So I have a very, and I'm going to go into the databases. The tables in here. So I only have two tables, and I have this patient table. And one of the things I like to do is any PHI field, I just like to prefix it with PHI. It becomes easier to find, and also sometimes I have another script if we need to de-identify patient information. I can do that easily because I know which ones are PHI fields in here. The group calculation is just like you could have multiple groups, let's say on the same FileMaker database, and so we're storing what group this patient belongs to. Okay. And so what I wanted to discuss with you at this point was how that from a schema standpoint, we're doing having the user on the FileMaker Go be able to log directly into FileMaker. So while that's open on the side, I'm just going to bring this screen up and go here. And let's get out of this. So let's quit FileMaker and let's go back into FileMaker. Gosh, this is one of the things that logging out wise, because I lock everything down. You know, you always want the demo gods to be good to you, but they're not always. I knew I should have closed this before. Okay. Hey, Ronnie, you know how you can get out of my file? Since I closed the scroll too. Oh, fun. Well, let's do it on this screen now, and we'll go through the other one. So basically what I'm trying to accomplish here is that when you come in and put a PIN number in, that it's going to log you into the system and know who you are. So to be able to do that, I don't want anyone to randomly put PIN numbers in, right? Because that would be someone guessing someone else's account. So we also formulate using the persistent ID. Many of you used the persistent ID before. If you haven't, it's a function in FileMaker that takes the device ID and brings it across, and it replaces the MAC address that people are using, because when you go from one wireless network to the next, that ID can change sometimes based on the network that you're currently on. So this makes this ID consistent. So when I go under scripts in here and I want to look. Maybe I should just put the script debugger and show you what. Well, actually, let me bring you over to the staff table first, so you can see kind of what's going on. Go to layout mode and go back to the staff table. So I have a staff person who can log into this with a PIN of 1111, and their device ID is this. Okay, so this is what comes off of whether it's your MacBook Pro or whether it's your iPhone, you can get this device ID. And I've associated Mickey Mouse with a group called Cardio. And so the account that I'm using when they log in is Mouse. Okay, so we've done a few things around this. If this is the approach that you want to take, is that we utilize under the patient table that whoever creates it is using that account name as a global field and stores it there. Okay, we can do the same thing with the modified too. Now, the next thing that we look at as well is when we go back to the staff table, is once we enter the I guess the big question becomes, you know, what happens when people have multiple devices, right? So if I have an iPhone and I have an iPad, I still want to access the same information and use the same PIN number. Well, what we've done is you can enter in more of them here as well. And so what happens if there is no device ID? So we create a new person. The script looks for that there is no device ID, and it puts in whoever first logs into this PIN number, that device ID in here, and we'll go through that script. Okay, so let's go back to the login page. Okay, I'm going to turn on my script debugger so you can see what's going on. And since I'm doing it from my MacBook, I'm just going to put in 4 nines. As soon as I click out, I have a script trigger that's running that then captures my PIN, and then I go find that PIN in my staff table. Okay, And so it found it. Now I erase the pin that's there and I store it. And then I grab my persistent ID. So this get persistent ID is critical to this whole thing. So if I open up my viewer, you can see now my PID is, I clicked out of FileMaker. So now my PID becomes this long string, okay? So as I step through now, I look to see if I have a record or not. If I don't, then the pin number is not correct and keeps me on this original layout for this, and you can read that and enter it. You can put in as many times. So what's important then on this layout is to completely lock it down that you can't get out of it. You can't select, get into the top bar and change things around and get to a different layout. So controlling your layouts are really important no matter what you're doing on these devices. Now here I put in is if my staff device ID is blank, then set it to the PID. Okay, so that's what it's doing now. So it's going to put it in there now. Now I have it, and so now it assumes that this device can always be in it. The next line, if there was a device ID, then I'm doing a pattern count here to see if the PID is exactly the same as one of the values that's in here. So I'm getting get value 1, get value 2. You can keep on going to get value 3 to see if the device ID matches any of the device IDs in here. So you could have one user have many devices that are associated with this account. So what does this do? Well, it allows us then to make sure that once that someone can't access a system that hasn't been already authorized. So this device in some way has to be authorized by who is the FileMaker manager or the DBA. If it doesn't match anything, then it's going to exit the application. Okay. It's just it doesn't like it. You're not authorized. The PIN number that you put in doesn't match any of the devices allowed, and it's going to exit you out of the system. And then after that, it's going to keep on going through. It's going to set my variables here, some more variables, and then I'm just going to go to my list. So here you'll notice that I'm finding on the patient ID, and then I'm performing a find because I also want to implement some record level security. So now I'm finding all the records that I have access to. Okay, and then I'm done. Okay, the scroll window I tend to use now because if I want to have a header, a sub summary in my list view, if I just go to the first record, in my found set is large. I'll never see that first header row, that sub summary row. Okay. Any questions about this? Love for someone to speak up, make it more interactive. Okay. So now getting back to this little screen, hit play again so people can see it. A couple things on record level. I'm sure everyone's done some type of record level security with their privilege sets. If you're doing any type of HIPAA stuff, I would say that you probably have. The one thing that you don't want to use is use global variables in your record level security. It doesn't always work if you're doing related conditional record level security. If you want to know more about that, then that's okay, fine. But you want to really use global variables or instead of global variables. And then the other thing that you want to do from a FileMaker security privileges is the extended privilege set. So you have a time requirement for login. I'm sure a lot of you already know that, but you can set that time to be anything you want. So I think that's a preference of the institution that they want to auto log you off after 5 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. It doesn't make a difference, and that's where you would want to control that. I said earlier that you want to control layout access. You just can't let people get to the menu header and select a different layout that you have checked off that can be displayed easily. So in your managed layouts, that's where you want to control and turn off a lot of layouts that you don't want people to have access to. And as well as the scripts too. And that's just general practice anyway. The encryption is, and I think I have a thing underneath that shouldn't be there. I just didn't delete it. You want to use a FileMaker Advanced to, you can use FileMaker Advanced to turn on encryption at rest. How many people have used encryption at rest on their devices, or at least on their server, for securing the data? Hope some of you have. Okay. So I just want to show you that because there's no real pros and cons to it. It's just a little bit. I think no matter what type of security you put onto a system, there is always an extra level that you have to do something generally to access it. So, and I think that just goes with security. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any reason for doing it. So let me just minimize this for a second, and then even look at this file here that we have set up. And I have an encrypted folder in here, and let me just take out these ones. So I'm just going to show you how to encrypt it because I think it's really important to know how it works. So you don't have the file open at all, and you go into developer utilities, and you're going to add the file that you want. So if I go back up one and then see my my patients file that I created, it's going to go into a project folder, which is encrypt, and I'll choose that. And then I'm going to specify the options that I want for my solution. So I think that if the file is going to be on the iPhone, you can take it one step further when you're deploying it, even if there's synchronization going on, and remove the admin access completely to the file. So we can do that. And the most important thing here is enable database encryption and re-encryption. So you need to know a full access account to get into it to be able to do this. And then you want to give it an encryption password in here, and I'll use a relatively weak one, okay? And then put a little password in, which is my company name, okay? So now that's set, I have a shared ID, and then I can click OK, and then I can create it. Okay, the file's really small, there's not that much to do with it, and now that file is encrypted. The problem with an encrypted file on FileMaker on an iPhone would be that every time you open it up, you're going to have to put in your encryption password to de-encrypt it. Okay, so that can be a pain in the neck. So now I have access to it, and now we can get in. Now I don't have full access to it anymore. I can't really get into it because I took out the master password out of the system. But I can still use my PIN, and I can get into the system that way. Okay. Now, once again, if I click on it, put in my password, I put in my PIN, and let's say I put a wrong PIN in, okay, it's going to say my PIN number is incorrect. If I put in a different PIN that I know is in there, and I do it, and I can get into it because I have the device ID associated with both accounts. Okay. Let's go back to the keynote. Where am I? So now, does anyone have any questions about this? please unmute yourself and just ask a question at this point. Really wanting to make this more interactive. We have a small group. There's only 12 of us on the call. Okay. So I'm going to hand it over to Robert.
Can you hear me, Tim?
Yeah.
Okay, I was just checking. Maybe other people can't speak, but I guess they can.
Mm-hmm. What's your question?
No, I might. It's not for HIPAA, and by the way, hi.
No problem.
I'm building something for a client that's going to be for WebDirect for a lot of students, and we need to be able to create accounts by them. So it needs to sort of function like a web-based system. Any thoughts on that? They have not said anything about HIPAA, and I don't think that is going to be an issue.
Well, if it's a school, they also have their own regulations about protecting student information. So it's a similar thing.
Yeah.
So what? So do you want to store accounts in the system in FileMaker or?
Yeah, I need to be able to have them create their own account instead of somebody, sending them their username and password.
Okay.
And I need to be able to have them, reset their passwords online, or if they forgot their username, send an email. The regular general things that we do on a web page nowadays. At least that's what I would like to do.
Yeah, you can do that. Are you talking to do that from like web pages, from like PHP or from WebDirect?
WebDirect.
Mm-hmm. No, you could set up that process, and then you can always what's the word I'm looking for? You can always have a process of reviewing all of those accounts too. So because someone needs to get access to it.
I didn't hear you. I have the process to do what?
You would have to. I think you need to look at kind of setting up rules around who can set up accounts, right? Themselves. You don't want every Joe from the outside getting in to set up an account.
Well, that's a good point actually, but I don't think a lot of people would get to that, URL necessarily. And we could basically approve their accounts afterwards.
You can. You could also do something like when they set it up, that you actually email them back what their password would be.
Well, actually, you know what? We're gonna have them. We're going to have them in the system. So we'll check, I guess their name, or ask for some other information and verify that they are in the system, and then they can create an account.
Yeah.
Or maybe I will create an account. I mean, I will think this over, I guess. But the other, well, no, I will not have to have them authenticated. Never mind. I'm done asking questions. Thank you. For now.
Hi, this is Robert. So I'm assuming there's a bad echo on the line.
Yeah,
so that's better. So first off, you're going to have a list of your users that are students. Mm-hmm. You should also, if you can collect their email address or let them provide that to you at the same time, then you can create a script that when the user is created, it automatically sends out an email to that particular student with some unique number that's contained in the file that they would use, because if we're going to do this to the entire student body, then anyone can log in as the person sitting at the next desk. And when you set it up in FileMaker Security, what you do is change password at next logon. So now everyone has a unique password. Very similar to the CMSs like Drupal or WordPress do.
Yeah. And I see Chris answered Gary's question too. Gary had a question about, can you host basically a FileMaker encrypted file on the server? And the answer is absolutely yes. And we're doing this at a lot of the sites. and it doesn't prompt the end user to put in that password like I just did. When you open up the file on the FileMaker server admin, it'll prompt you there for those passwords that then de-encrypts it at that point. So I think that should answer your question. Any other questions? I'm just trying to scan this real quick, and then I'm going to turn over the mic to Robert so he can go through the mobile device management and how that's important. Any other questions that anyone wants to ask? From a security standpoint, I think that Active Directory is the ironclad way of doing things. But sometimes you're presented with the end users asking for different ways of doing it and how maybe you can approach to meeting those security needs from an active. And this PIN approach is just one way of doing it. I'm all for the first way of using Active Directory to authenticate against the server every single time. But this is just another approach of doing that. Okay, and I know we haven't talked about getting data directly on an iPhone and synchronization between the source and whatnot. Robert and I have had a lot of experience doing that, and we can present that, or someone else can present that at another call and how we do it. The other thing, actually, I'll wait till the end for we can discuss maybe future topics. So Robert, let me hand this over to you. I'll give you my screen so you can click any way you want. And I don't want you to presenter, but I want to give you control. And where are you? There you are. And I'll put it on play. And I think you just need to hit the your space bar should make it go. If not,
great, thanks, Tim. So my formal background is in infrastructure, and I've actually run a global operation for a Fortune 50 company. So Tim and I kind of complement each other. FileMaker is a love of mine. I'm not really a programmer from my degree. I'm an infrastructure guy. We, at my current organization, the Institute for Family Health, have implemented a clinical system with Antidotes Health. Our visiting nurses carry around iPads throughout New York City, Long Island, and Westchester. So it's pretty graphically diverse in the lower New York State. All the iPads are secured. I did a ton of research around this. Okay, so I'm clicking and it's not moving. There we go.
It went too far up. Let me go back one.
Sorry.
There you go.
Right. So some of the considerations that you want. So if first of all, what's your device OS? Now with WebDirect, you have options around that to use Droids in addition to iOS operating systems. Size is a huge question that you want to ask, and something that Tim's team and I looked at as we were in the system design and analysis phase, which is the right ergonomically correct device, battery level life, and the cellular vendor was also key importance. We hold the data on the iPad and then sync it back. That's because if the nurses are in a building that doesn't have cellular coverage in the middle of Manhattan, New York City, they wouldn't have a two-way conversation back to the server, so the data is downloaded. The MDM device, is it cloud-based or is it locally installed? And depending upon the complexity of the system that you're going to use, you want to consider that also. So we actually use a cloud-based environment. So the vendor actually is doing the updates and patches for us, which is great from an IT resource standpoint. But even though it's cloud-based, we still had to create 3 virtual servers internally. which I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. And the other thing you want to consider is your, the IT resources themselves. So depending upon the mobile device, you're going to obviously have to have some expertise in being able to control that. So, if you're an iPhone user and someone hands you a Droid or a BlackBerry, one, does the system support it? And two, there are obviously going to be different ways that you're going to need to configure the device. You're going to need a mobile security specialist to configure the MDM software. And obviously, we're all on the phone as FileMaker developers. We're going to have to make sure that the developers themselves are involved in the process. The real gotcha comes with the initial and recurring costs, and you want to get those up front. So you want to know what your budget is, and you want to know how many users potentially you're dealing with. My project, my MDM software that I chose was Mobile Iron. It was $15,000 initially, and a recurring $45 a year per device after that for maintenance. Okay, the next thing you want to think about is who owns the device. So is it a BYOD, as Tim alluded to earlier? We're fortunate enough that the devices that we're giving to our nurses for the clinical system are company-owned, but we also have other people that use BYOD devices. So how does that handle it? Well, in Mobile Iron's case, and you can use my experience for Mobile Iron sort of like a checklist as you're looking at various products. Mobile Iron actually partitions the iPhone or other devices, so you have two different spaces running, and your Mobile Iron area is its own, and the personal area is its own virtual system. Less cost usually means less control, and we'll talk about to what level of control you need in a second. If the personal device breaks and the user needs the device to perform his or her job, what are you going to do? So you have a spare on the side. Generally, it takes us about 45 minutes to provision a brand new iPad, install it, the Mobile Iron software, and then download the software that they need. The device can easily fill up with data. So, if it's a BYOD device and they have, 40,000 pieces of music on there, and with a 16 megabyte iPhone, they may not have the storage to be able to download the Mobile Iron or the MDM software in addition to the business applications and the data. So your risk tolerance is from defensive being, the most strong way, to reluctant, to opportunist, to aggressive. You need to consider that at the get-go. So what does that mean? So there needs to be some type of central control on the device, right? So again, who decides if the device's OS can be upgraded? So if it's a BYOD and your MDM software only supports iOS 8 and iOS 9 came out yesterday, the device may become unusable for business-related processes. Can they be restricted as to what they can download? So in the Mobile Iron space, we actually have our own company store, and they can only download programs or apps that are located in our store. They have no access to the Apple Store. Can you track the device? So do you need to know or want to know where the device is at any particular time through GPS? So are you allowing the user to shut GPS off? Can you wipe the device at will? If the device is stolen, can you wipe it with a magic bullet? Can you push content remotely from a central location? Does the user get authenticated on the network? So, every time you set up another system, that adds to the level of complexity for account administration. So, a person gets terminated and walked out of the company, and now you have all these disparate systems that aren't talking to each other. And MobileIron is connected right through Active Directory for us, so disabling the Active Directory account disables the iPad at that moment. What if they install a crack on the iPhone or the OS, or download a third-party app that's not compliant? So in MobileIron's case, any change to the iOS, if you allow the user to download it, and if you crack it, it automatically wipes the device. And again, with the apps, you can only download what's in our company store. And can you get access to shared resources, company resources? So are they using the device solely to run this app that's linked through FileMaker, or is it going to become a business tool that you're going to be able to do other things with? So here's a picture of the ecosystem for MobileIron, and they have a number of features, and we'll go through them on the left-hand side, the end-user products that sit on the iPad and iPhone, which for our clinical system, it's purely an iPad. But MobileIron supports BlackBerries, Windows phones, Droids. So it's really very robust, and it actually has the upper quadrant of the Gartner matrix. On the right-hand side, we talk about the IT side of the equation. You know, do you have a management console on the top right where you have full control to be able to push things and pull things from the device with reporting and analytics? So we know where not only where our nurses are at any particular time, if they have a cellular connection, but we're also capturing that information and using that through Google Maps. The application delivery network, if we patch the application for Go, we can push that out. So we built, with the Antidote's help, we can actually push out updates right to the device without losing any data.
So meaning, guys, that we're able to push down a new FileMaker file right to the device that's local on it. So that gives a good way for versioning, keeping everyone up to date with the correct version of the FileMaker application.
So the core system in any MDM has to deal with enabling policies. So what are your policies defined as internally in your organization as with regards to mobile devices? And you can create different groups, and within those groups, if they're company owned, you may have a certain set of policies. If it's the president of the company, you may have a secondary set of policies, and if it's a BYOD, you may have a third set of policies. Is it integrated with the back end of the IT platform, such as Active Directory, as I said we did? The Century management system allows us to have an intelligent gateway where the device is authenticating first internally before going to the cloud to communicate to the FileMaker application. MobileIron encrypts the entire device, or part of the device if it's a BYOD. So you can, so even if you had the FileMaker level of security, but then you also have the storage level of security, which is one higher. So, my FileMaker file may be encrypted, but the other stuff that may be on the device isn't. Right? I created a confidential memo on my iPad. I can define, which corporate resources are available, and we'll talk about that in a second. And the security services, you can define, again, if the documents are secured, if the device is secured, and have visibility throughout. So the MobileIron client, which is actually installed on the device, enforces that configuration, and we can change the configuration at will and push that out. Apps at work. So not only does the nurses use their FileMaker clinical system, but they will also have access to a file share for the clinical department. So if there's a Department of Health document that needs to be distributed to everyone, rather than send it through an email, you can use the Apps at Work, which is and Doxit work, which allow you to put it in secure locations, encrypted, and the transmission is obviously encrypted to the device over the cellular network. And they're using their iPad with that shared folder on the server here as if they were sitting inside the organization and have a map drive, the letter G. And last but not least is the help at work. So, we can quickly deploy, push, and provide help services to the users in the field. The only thing that's not provided yet is the ability for us to do a screen share with the iPad or iPhone. You'd have to use something like TeamViewer or some other product, JoinMe, to be, I know TeamViewer is supported on the iPhone and the iPad, and if the user really gets into that much trouble and they can't figure out what to do, simply by talking them through it, we can connect that way.
Great. Oh, sorry.
No problem. So the data view allows us to monitor the capabilities, the capacity, how much storage is being used on the system, have real-time alerts that come back to a dashboard within our organization if they exceed the data plan, for example. They may move to an area that they need roaming, and we can turn that on. The Mobile Lion Tunnel, and this says enable iOS 7 or later, so I was just taking this image from the research that I did over a year and a half ago, but they're now fully compliant with iOS 9, Mobile Lion. They announced that yesterday. So everything's through the tunnel and the VPN. The App Connect is something I shared with you earlier. We have our own store, so they can't go and download their own games or other software. And the App Connect ecosystem allows them to also connect to technology inside the company, should they need to do that. So if they, for example, if we were running Citrix, we can, rather than from an infrastructure standpoint, I would not necessarily have to have a Citrix gateway, which is about $50,000 to put in. That Citrix uses to secure the connection. This is actually done through the Mobile Lion product to bypass the Citrix gateway and does the same exact thing. Okay, any questions regarding MDM? Great. I turn it back over to you, Tim.
Okay, as the train goes by my window. Just want to say, I think these are some of the resources that I looked at. Once again, this will, if anyone wants the keynote, we can email it to you, or we can make it available for download on the on FMHUG. The whole presentation will be up on YouTube, as I said earlier. I think a couple like housekeeping notes. Get through that. Wait, question and answer. Is that it? Yeah, I guess that's. I put. If people want to unmute themselves, or they can put it in the chat. This is all about us as a group of healthcare developers that want to share information. And what I try to do is to at least pick a topic that for this one, that I thought there might be some interest in people learning more about it. There are many ways to skin a cat in any one of these things. So talking about this, and I think why people were saying at DevCon was having a panel approach to some of these things may be helpful. But we're only as good as the members of this organization. So your input and not only your input, but your involvement within the organization is what's going to make it good. As you probably can tell, I'm fairly passionate about being a FileMaker developer, and I'm equally as passionate about doing stuff in healthcare. And I want to be able to share some of my knowledge, but I am not, what's the word I'm looking for? I can always learn a lot more than I know right now. And there's some real people that are technical that can get behind the scenes of knowing what other stuff is there. So does anyone have any questions or comments or how you think we should proceed as an organization? Was this the right speed? Is this what people were looking for? I know people are still out there. uh, I think, if people really, I appreciate people emailing me offline, or we can put some forum posts up there about anyone have suggestions for the next topic that we might want to uncover, and we can go find the right person to do it, to present. And if you don't right now, that's okay. We can once again post in the forum. Some of my ideas is we really need to get a panel together about breaking the IT barrier, and then we can do a whole thing on. I don't know if we have any research experts, but I know RedCap is making in-trenches and removing FileMaker from a lot of organizations and pushing researchers in that. We can talk about that too. And then audit trails are a huge thing that people are talking about, and they want it inherent in the system, but there's no system out there that's inherent. Just quickly looking through. Yeah, we can do HL7 engines too. I've done a lot of it already. We're doing on HL7 messages, we're doing a bunch of different ADT type of feeds. Not only are we doing imports of files that might be HL7 files, but we've actually doing getting live messages through TCP too, which is great. I'd love to share everyone the audit trail stuff that we're currently using now. I've probably gone through 3 or 4 different iterations of how we do audit trails here at Antidote, and I love the best one that we came up with yet. It tracks everything from importing data in, which was one of the areas that I couldn't control. Now I'm able to track even when you import records into the system. I'd like to keep things going monthly. And as long as there's interest and people show up to the meetings and we have enough topics, I just feel like we lose momentum if we just do it quarterly. But we need everyone's not support, but we need people to pitch in, I guess, to maybe take up a presentation for a month. You can just show off what you currently been doing, what concerns that you have. And that would be a great, help for all of us. And is this also comment too on whether this is a good time for everyone? Should we be doing it in the evening, or people like it during work? We talked about this at DEF CON. People felt that noon was a good time because we can get people getting into work in California. And if anyone that may be in Europe that wants to be involved in this too, then they can get in, although it might be early in the evening. And it could be any day of the week. I like Fridays my best because things slow down here a little bit for Fridays. The phone doesn't ring as much, and I try to stay in the office because I'm usually on the road a lot too. So other than that, if anyone has any questions, let me know. And otherwise, we will pick up next month. I'll make it consistent. I think we'll make it either the second or third Friday of each month. I think the third Friday may be the better thing to do. And I think that way everyone knows when it is and it'll be consistent. Does that work for everyone? That could be like the third Friday, and I'll send out an email to everyone. Also, too, as a recap, we have over 175 members that have registered. And I like to keep that going. Hopefully we can get more. At some point, I might need FileMaker support in providing a GoToWebinar account for us. But if not, we'll figure out if we need to do some type of small dues for everyone and that would be great. Okay, well, everyone enjoy their weekend, and we'll catch up next month. In the interim, use the forums with any questions, and hopefully, listen. I don't monitor them every day. I don't get every single email from them, but I think if we get more in there, then I don't mind turning on my email to get maybe a summary of each day. And I think that's possible. I can ask Robert if that is or not. And so thanks so much, and we'll talk next month. And Robert said it is possible. So you can send out digests. So great. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.